As with fiscal policy, there are two different types of monetary policy: expansionary monetary policy and contractionary monetary policy. And as the names imply, you know exactly what the Federal Reserve is trying to do with the economy with each of these type of policies. With expansionary monetary policy, they're trying to expand or stimulate the US economy. And with contractionary monetary policy, they're trying to contract it or slow it down just a little bit. And with each of these policies, remember, the Federal Reserve has control over the money supply, so they're going to be conducting these open market operations in order to stimulate or slow down the economy. However, the mechanisms and channels are something that we need to delve a little bit more into, so let's go ahead and get straight into that. Here, we'll go ahead and talk about expansionary monetary policy first. Expansionary monetary policy. With expansionary monetary policy, these are Federal Reserve actions designed to increase reserves and the money supply to stimulate the economy. So the Federal Reserve, Fed actions designed to increase excess reserves, and the money supply, to stimulate the economy. So here, with expansionary monetary policy, you're going to notice that the same end goal is going to be apparent with expansionary fiscal policy. However, the mechanisms and channels are completely different from one another. With expansionary fiscal policy, they were also trying to stimulate the economy. But with expansionary monetary policy, they are also trying to stimulate the economy. But what goes on in between here is something that we need to go ahead and take a closer look at. So here, we started off on this transition, on this process in the previous chapter. So let's go ahead and extend it just a little bit more. So here, suppose that the Federal Reserve decides to pursue some type of expansionary monetary policy. How do they start this off? So here, they're going to be pursuing an open market purchase. So Fed buys government bonds. Remember, the special name that we gave for buying government bonds was an open market purchase. So an open market purchase of these particular government bonds. And when they pursue this open market purchase, what does that do to our money supply? It's going to expand our money supply. So expands money supply. And as the money supply increases, remember that in the sort of exact impact is going to be on the interest rates. So here we want to go ahead and see what happens to interest rates. And as the money supply goes up, that is going to cause interest rates to go down. Interest rates get pushed down. And as interest rates get pushed down, that's going to have an impact on the economy. So here, this is where we're going to expand the sort of mechanism that we laid out in the previous chapter. Here, as interest rates go down, that's going to have an impact on all the components of GDP. So CIG and net exports. So here, we hit on three of them at least. So as interest rates go down, number one, it increases consumption. Number two, it increases investment. And then number three, it increases exports. And these are all the categories of GDP. And as these go up, as consumption, investment, and exports go up, this is going to cause our aggregate demand to go up as well. So increases aggregate demand. And remember, aggregate demand, these are all the components of essentially GDP or aggregate expenditures. But here, as aggregate demand increases, that is going to have an impact on our little economy. So here, we want to go ahead and take a look at why consumption, why investment, and why exports are all going to change as a result of interest rates changing. We can also talk about the government as well. It's sort of a tertiary effect, but we can go ahead and make a few notes about that as well. So here, as interest rates are lowered, we want to see the impact on CIG and net export. So here, we'll start this off right here. So as interest rates are lowered, remember, we're only going to be doing this in one particular direction. If you want to go ahead and see what happens to the opposite side, just change everything to the opposite side. So number one, we notice that consumers and businesses find the cost of borrowing decreases. So number one, consumers and businesses find the cost of borrowing find the cost of borrowing decreases. Remember, interest rates just are the price for money. So as interest rates get pushed down, consumers are going to borrow more, businesses are going to borrow more, and they're going to go ahead and invest more. They're going to consume more, spend more money. So here, it's a twofold effect. Consumption and investment both go up. So remember, consumers like you and I, we borrow money for our mortgages, for our car payments, for education. Businesses are going to borrow money to finance their investment projects, and when these sort of things happen, consumption and investment are going to go up. Secondary effect hits on the government side. Remember that we really don't hit the government all too much in terms of the sort of impact on the interest rates, but there is a tertiary impact that we can go ahead and take a look at. The government is going to spend less on financing the debt. So government spends less on financing the debt. So remember, with our government budget constraint, anytime the government runs a deficit, it adds to the national debt, and we have to pay some type of interest on that. But if interest rates get pushed down, the government is going to go ahead and pay less in terms of interest on the national debt. So here, as the government spends less on financing the debt, they can go ahead and spend somewhere else that really, really needs it. So once again, that's going to have an impact on aggregate demand and the economy. And then finally here, we take a look at the international side with net exports. So here, this is where the impact of bonds are going to be seen. So do you think American bonds, they're going to be more expensive or less expensive when interest rates go down? So remember, there is going to be an inverse relationship between interest rates and bond prices. So American bonds are more expensive and are seen as less attractive to foreign investors. So American bonds are seen as less attractive, to foreign investors. Because the bond prices have essentially shot up when interest rates go down. So not many people want American bonds anymore. So when this sort of thing happens, we do notice that, hey, people don't want American bonds, so that's going to tell us that the value of the US dollar is going to depreciate as well. So here, the value of the US dollar, falls or depreciates. Depreciates. And essentially, the reason why the US dollar falls is because in order to buy American or US bonds, you need to pay for them in US dollars. So if people aren't buying US bonds, there's not a lot of demand for them. So therefore, there's not a lot of demand for US dollars. So therefore, the value of the dollar is going to depreciate. But as the US dollar depreciates, that tells us that, hey, American goods are actually a lot cheaper. So American goods are cheaper. And if American goods are cheaper, what does that do? It bodes very, very well for our export industries because people are going to go ahead and want to buy a lot more American goods. So stimulates US or American exports. So as American goods are cheaper, it stimulates American, we'll put US exports, and reduces US imports. So essentially that we have right here, as American goods become cheaper because the value of the US dollar depreciates, we're going to send a lot more goods and services abroad, so our exports shoot up. But also because our US dollar depreciates, we're not going to be buying as much abroad or internationally. So here our imports are going to fall, and that has the impact of causing X minus M, our net exports, to go up. So essentially here we see that, hey, net exports have gone up. That's going to impact our aggregate demand, and that's going to stimulate our economy. So something a little bit weird right here, we actually like a weak dollar or a depreciating dollar because it's going to help our US exports, our US net exports to rise. So something a little bit unusual with that. So as you can see right here, with expansionary monetary policy, it's going to have an impact on C, I, it has sort of a secondary impact on G, but also on X minus M, so our net exports. And all of these are impacts on aggregate demand So, if the Federal Reserve is successful at pursuing expansionary monetary policy, when we have our aggregate demand analysis, it's going to shift our aggregate demand curve over to the right, away from the origin. So here, this is exactly what we saw under fiscal policy, but for an entirely different mechanisms, as we can see right here. And just for completion, we can go ahead and turn our attention to the other side of the argument with contractionary monetary policy instead. So with contractionary monetary policy, we'll just give you the sort of foundation for it right here, but I think you guys get the idea of it with it already. So here, with contractionary monetary policy. So with contractionary monetary policy, this is just going to be moving everything to the opposite side. The Federal Reserve actually wants to decrease excess reserves and wants to raise interest rates. So Fed actions designed to decrease excess reserves, designed to decrease excess reserves and the money supply to fight inflation. And the money supply to fight inflation. So here, this is the primary reason why the Federal Reserve would ever want to pursue any type of contractionary monetary policy, slowing down the economy. The main goal is to go ahead and fight inflation. And what exactly do they do? Well, just change everything that we did with expansionary monetary policy to the opposite case. So here, the Federal Reserve is going to go ahead and sell bonds. They have an open market sale. This decreases the money supply. Interest rates get pushed up. It's going to decrease consumption, investment, and net exports, and that's going to cause a decrease in aggregate demand. So basically here, just change everything to the opposite side, and you know exactly what happens with contractionary monetary policy. In terms of our graphical analysis, we shift our aggregate demand curve towards the origin, over to the left, and that is going to help fight inflation. So as we can see right here, expansionary monetary policy, expansionary monetary policy, contractionary monetary policy, it has the same shifts as expansionary and contractionary fiscal policies, but the mechanisms and channels are all entirely different from one another. So that is something that you should keep in mind when we do this type of analysis. With all of this in mind, you know the foundations of fiscal policy, you know the foundations of monetary policy. Now we want to get a little bit more into the sort of ideology behind all of these and see what differing thoughts of economics believe about monetary policy and fiscal policy. Which one is better? Which one should the government be pursuing? Should we have any government at all? So 3 different theories of economics in our next section. I'll see you guys in those videos.